Imagine this. Buried beneath your feet are the broken bones of a forgotten world. A world that once breathed, built, dreamed, and vanished, long before the pyramids ever rose. What if I told you that our species, Homo sapiens, is not the beginning of the story, but the final chapter of something much older, far stranger, and possibly not entirely human? I've seen things most textbooks ignore. Tools crafted millions of years before civilization, temples older than farming, and human skeletons that don't belong in the family tree. This isn't a conspiracy, it's evidence, real, tangible, and it all leads to one terrifying question. What came before us, and why did it disappear? My name is Dr. Jonathan Hale. I've spent over 3 decades brushing away the dust of time, from the icy caves of Siberia to sun-bleached deserts in Turkey. I've followed a trail older than written language, older than myth itself. But no matter where I go, I find the same thing. Fragments of a story too ancient to fit into our current history. And yet, they're real, undeniable. I invite you to walk with me through the shadows of prehistory. We're going to challenge what you were taught in school. We'll meet other species of humans, yes, other humans, that lived alongside us. We'll visit temples carved from stone before agriculture even existed. And we'll confront myths that may not be myths at all. This is not a documentary. This is a revelation, a journey to the edge of science, where logic meets legend, and archaeology collides with the impossible. And when we're done, you may realize, we are not the first advanced civilization on this planet. We may only be the survivors of the last one. In this film, we'll explore 7 unforgettable chapters of humanity's buried past, from the moment we stood on 2 feet, to the whispers of ancient gods who may have walked among us. We'll ask questions no historian dares to answer, and follow the clues they left behind. Chapters we'll uncover. 1. The first spark of humanity, Lucy and her kind. 2. Neanderthals and Denisovans, our ancient siblings in the dark. 3. Göbekli Tepe, the temple that shouldn't exist. 4. The lost civilizations and the flood that buried them. 5. Maps, lasers, and stonework no one can explain. 6. Giants, bones, and the archives that vanished. 7. Was there once an ancient war of the gods? History begins here, in the dirt, in the bones, in the silence. Let me show you what I found. Chapter I. The First Humans. From the memoirs of Dr. Jonathan Hale, archaeologist. Every journey into the past begins with a single footprint. I remember the first time I saw her. Lucy. Not the living, breathing creature, but the bones. Curved, fossilized, perfectly ancient. She was laid out on a sterile lab table in Addis Ababa. But even in that cold clinical space, she radiated something. Something older than history itself. I was just a young researcher then, fresh out of grad school, full of questions and not enough discipline. But Lucy? Lucy was older than questions. She was the beginning of the story we call us. Her skeleton, small, delicate, just over a meter tall, belonged to a species known as Australopithecus afarensis. She lived 3.2 million years ago, yet she walked upright, on 2 legs, like we do. And that changed everything. Because to walk upright meant freedom. It meant you could carry your child, your tools, your dead. It meant your hands were free to create. And once our hands were freed, so were our minds. But Lucy, as it turns out, wasn't alone. In the years that followed, more of her kind, more of our kind, emerged from the earth like whispers rising from the soil. In Chad, a skull was found dating back nearly 7 million years. Its face was flatter than a chimp's. Its foramen magnum, where the spine connects to the skull, positioned like ours. They called him Sahelanthropus chadensis. And suddenly, the straight-line story of human evolution was no longer straight. It was a wild, tangled web. By the time we reached 2.5 million years ago, The world was alive with possibility. Enter Homo habilis, the handyman. He wasn't tall, he wasn't fast, but he did something no creature had done before him. He made tools. Simple ones. Yes, rocks chipped into sharp flakes. But they had purpose. Edges to cut meat, points to dig roots. For the first time, we were shaping the world instead of just reacting to it. I once held one of those tools in Kenya, found in a riverbed near Lake Turkana. It was older than the idea of gods, older than writing, wheels, or kings, just a piece of flint, sharp as bone. But to me, it felt like holding the first spark of consciousness. Then came Homo erectus, the traveler, the fire bringer. He left Africa before anyone else. Nearly 2 million years ago, he crossed deserts and forests, following the sun. His fossils have been found in Georgia, in China, even on the Indonesian island of Java. And he brought with him something far more dangerous than teeth or claws. Fire. We found the charred remains in Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Ashes, embedded deep within the earth, 1 million years old. Try to imagine that, a single ember, glowing in the dark of prehistory. A fire kept alive by hands now turned to dust. Fire gave us warmth, safety, food, but it gave us something else, too. Time. Around the fire, we weren't hunting or hiding. We were talking, watching, remembering. Fire didn't just cook our meals, it cooked our myths. That, I believe, is when story was born. But the most haunting thing I've ever realized is this. For most of our existence, we were not alone. Roughly 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged in Africa. But by then, the world was already full. There were Neanderthals in the frozen caves of Europe. There were Denisovans in the shadowed mountains of Siberia. There may have been others we haven't even discovered yet, ghosts without names. And for a time, we all lived together, shared the earth, drank from the same rivers, looked up at the same stars. There is evidence, clear, genetic evidence, that we interbred. That some of their blood still pulses through our veins. That when we say, human, we're not just talking about us. We're talking about all of them, too. But something happened, something quiet, something final. One by one, they disappeared. Only we remained. And so, the world forgets. Textbooks reduce millions of years to a tidy paragraph. Diagrams make it look like progress was inevitable. But I have sat in caves where Neanderthals once mourned their dead. I have stood in valleys where stone tools once struck bone. And I have held skulls in my hands that don't quite match anything we've ever known. This isn't evolution in a straight line. This is survival, chaos, tragedy, and maybe design? The further I dig, the more I believe we're walking on the ruins of something older than civilization. Older than memory. Older than us. Studio Microphone Chapter 2. The Forgotten Siblings. From the Field Journals of Dr. Jonathan Hale, archaeologist. Not all ghosts haunt us with fear. Some haunt us with memory. I once stood in the twilight of a limestone cave in southern France. The air was still, the rocks cool beneath my hands. On the wall, faint but clear, were handprints. Dozens of them, pressed in ochre and ash by someone who had lived, and died, over 40,000 years ago. And here's the part that still chills me to this day. Those handprints didn't belong to us. They belonged to Neanderthals. For generations, we imagined them as brutes, bent-backed, dim-witted, dragging clubs behind them. But we were wrong. Terribly wrong. They buried their dead with flowers. They painted. They carved. They made tools as sharp and refined as our own. In Shanidar Cave, in modern-day Iraq, archaeologists found a Neanderthal skeleton curled beside clusters of ancient pollen. The man had been carefully placed in death, perhaps by kin. His bones showed he had survived severe injuries, a crushed leg, blindness in one eye. Someone had cared for him, nurtured him, loved him. Does that sound like a brute to you? And there's more. In the Altai Mountains of Siberia lies a cave carved by time and wind, Denisova Cave. Inside it, we found a tooth, massive, ancient, non-human, then a finger bone, then fragments of DNA unlike anything else we'd seen. This wasn't a Neanderthal, and it wasn't a modern human. It was something in between. They called her Denisovan, after the cave that kept her secret for over 50,000 years. I remember the day I held that tooth. It didn't belong to any known species in our textbooks. It belonged to a people we never even knew existed, until 2010. That year, something extraordinary happened. We sequenced the genome of the Denisovan, and found something shocking. Their DNA is in us. Today, people in Southeast Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Islands still carry fragments of Denisovan DNA. It shapes how we respond to oxygen, to diseases, to altitude. It shapes who we are. So let me ask you something. How can we call ourselves modern humans when our blood is woven with the ghosts of forgotten siblings? There's more. In 2019, a team of researchers uncovered a new mystery: the remains of a child in Denisova Cave, born from a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. A hybrid, not just a theory, a real child, with two ancient bloodlines dancing in her cells. The implications are staggering. These groups didn't just coexist, they mingled. They formed bonds. They had children together. What kind of stories did they tell each other? What kind of languages did they speak in the night? We'll never know. And yet, something happened. Something subtle. Something silent. Around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals disappeared. The Denisovans vanished even earlier, slipping into shadow, leaving only fragments behind. And we, Homo sapiens, we remained. Why? Why them, and not us? Was it climate, disease, competition, or was there something else? Something darker? I don't have the answer. But I do know this. Their blood runs in ours. I often wonder what they would think if they could see us now. Skyscrapers, satellites, Mars rovers, and nuclear fire. We carry their legacy, but forget their names. But I remember the handprints on the wall. I remember the child of two ancient worlds. And I carry their story with me. Because they weren't our ancestors. They were our siblings. And we were the ones who lived. Chapter 3. Temples Before Time. From the excavation diaries of Dr. Jonathan Hale. They say civilization began with farming. But what if it was the other way around? I still remember the first time I saw it. Not in person, no. That would come later, but in a photograph. Buried in the back of an old archaeology journal. Barely noticed by the world at the time. A stone. Tall, smooth, almost impossibly carved. With the shape of a lion, no. A serpent? And beside it, another, taller still. And another. And another. Arranged in a perfect circle. Buried deep beneath the soil of southeastern Turkey. The site was called Göbekli Tepe, the hill of the navel. But what it contained was nothing short of a rebirth. For centuries, we thought we understood the arc of civilization. First came the hunter-gatherers. Primitive, nomadic, surviving day by day. Then came agriculture. With food came surplus. With surplus came cities. With cities came temples. And with temples came gods. Simple, logical, linear. But Göbekli Tepe destroyed that story. Because the stones there, some weighing over 20 tons, were carved and erected 12,000 years ago. Let me say that again. 12,000 years ago. That's 7,000 years before Stonehenge. 6,000 years before the pyramids. Before writing. Before pottery. Before farming. And yet, they built a temple. A place of worship. Of ceremony. Of mystery. But how? How did a society of supposed nomads organize the labor, the engineering, the vision, to build such a place? And more importantly, why? They weren't building homes. They weren't storing food. They were building something sacred. And then, they buried it. Yes, they didn't abandon Göbekli Tepe. They intentionally, methodically, carefully buried it, like a secret they didn't want anyone to find. I've been there. I've walked among the stones. T-shaped pillars rising from the ground like silent sentinels, each one etched with animals, foxes, boars, vultures, lions, scorpions, arranged in patterns we still can't decode. And when you stand in the center of those rings, you feel something, a silence so deep, it presses against your chest, a presence that predates language. It doesn't feel like history. It feels like memory. There's a theory, still debated, still fragile, that Göbekli Tepe wasn't built by farmers, but that it inspired farming. Think about that. Maybe it wasn't agriculture that created religion, but religion that created agriculture. That's not just a shift in science. That's a shift in how we understand ourselves. Because it means we've always been seekers, always been storytellers. Long before we were builders, we were believers. And then comes the real question. The one that keeps me awake at night. Where did the knowledge come from? Who taught them how to lift stone? Who showed them symmetry, balance, purpose? And why do similar patterns, T-pillars, circular sanctuaries, appear on other continents thousands of years later? Was Göbekli Tepe the first echo of something even older? A memory passed down from a world already gone? A civilization lost to fire, to ice, to flood? You see, every archaeologist has a moment when science fails, when the data doesn't fit, when the story we've been told collapses under the weight of the evidence. Göbekli Tepe was mine. I don't know who built it. I don't know why they buried it. But I do know this. They were not primitive. They were not simple. They were us. And we forgot them. Chapter IV. The Great Flood and the Buried Civilizations. From the Lost Journals of Dr. Jonathan Hale, archaeologist. All around the world, different cultures speak of a great flood. But what if they're all remembering the same thing? The first time I heard about Atlantis, I was a child. My grandfather, a fisherman, used to sit by the fire and speak of a lost city beneath the sea. A place with towers of gold, streets of silver, and knowledge beyond imagination. I thought it was just a fairy tale. Until I became an archaeologist. And I began to see the same story. Everywhere. In Mesopotamia, they called him Unapishtim, a man warned by the gods to build a boat before the waters swallowed the earth. In India, Manu was told to preserve life on a great ark during a cosmic flood. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha survived a deluge sent by Zeus. In Mesoamerica, the gods punished humanity with water, cleansing the world for a new age. Even among the indigenous peoples of North America, stories echo across tribes, from the Hopi to the Cree, of a great flood that ended one world and began another. Different continents, different tongues, same memory. I stood once in the Gulf of Khambhat, off the western coast of India. Diving expeditions there uncovered the outlines of a sunken city, stone foundations, walls, possible dwellings, all submerged beneath the sea. Carbon dating of organic material from the site? Nearly 9.500 years old. That predates every known city in human history. And yet, almost no one talks about it. Why? The same pattern repeats itself off the coasts of Japan, Cuba, even Malta. Structures, steps, monoliths, all swallowed by the sea. And as the last ice age ended, sea levels rose over 400 feet. Entire coastlines vanished. Land bridges disappeared. Millions of square miles of land, gone. Think about it. If advanced human settlements existed near the ocean, as most civilizations naturally do, they would have been the first to drown, and the last to be remembered. Or worse, remembered as myth. That brings us to Atlantis. Not the Disney version, not the domes and lasers. The one Plato described in 360 BCE. A mighty empire, technologically advanced, spiritually decadent, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. He said the story came from Egyptian priests, passed to Solon, and then to him. Most scholars dismiss it as fiction. But what if it was memory, passed down like a fragile ember across generations? Not of a city, but of a civilization, a forgotten age. Call it Atlantis, call it the first world. Whatever it was real enough to leave scars. In Turkey's Lake Van region, I once examined layers of sediment containing fine ash, marine life, and human bones, mixed together, compressed by sudden pressure, like everything had been swept away, then slammed shut. It wasn't erosion, it was cataclysm. Today, we live in skyscrapers, we orbit satellites, we code the fabric of digital reality. But we forget that we live on a planet with memory, a planet that breathes, that shifts, that rises and floods. And perhaps the Earth remembers what we do not, that we've been here before, and we've lost it all. So many ancient sites, Göbekli Tepe, Mohenjo-Daro, Nan Madol, Yonaguni, sit on the edge of historical possibility. They appear fully formed, no trial and error, like echoes of something that came before. What if we're not building upward, but merely rebuilding what once was? I believe this. The Great Flood was not just a story. It was a marker, a warning. And if we listen closely, beneath the myth, beneath the silence, we might hear the voices of those who came before, whispering, "Don't forget us. Don't make the same mistake." Chapter V. The Technology We Forgot. From the field notes of Dr. Jonathan Hale, archaeologist. If ancient people were primitive, then why did they build like engineers? There's a moment every archaeologist dreads. It's not the heat, not the dust, not even the bureaucracy. It's the silence, the kind of silence that falls when you realize this shouldn't exist. I first felt that silence standing before a wall in Sahelanthropus, Peru. Massive stones, some weighing over 100 tons, fit together without mortar, without gaps, and so precisely that you can't even slip a razor blade between them. They weren't bricks, they were puzzle pieces, curved edges, interlocking geometry, slightly melted surfaces, as if the stone had once been soft, pliable, then fused together like wax. But there were no cranes, no steel tools, no written plans, just a civilization we call Inca, though many believe they only inherited the site. They didn't build it, someone else did, someone older, and Sahelanthropus isn't alone. Travel across the world, and the same anomalies appear. Small diamond in Baalbek, Lebanon, 3 stone blocks, each weighing over 800 tons, stacked into a foundation. Even modern cranes would struggle to lift them. Small diamond in Egypt, at the Osirion, stone cutting so precise that modern engineers marvel at the surface polish, cut from hard red granite, as if by high-speed tools. Small diamond in India, at Ellora Caves, a temple complex carved top-down into solid rock, with symmetry, corridors, pillars, all made by removing thousands of tons of stone. No blueprints, no margin for error. Who had this precision? How? Some researchers offer explanations. Endless labor, rudimentary copper tools, decades, sometimes centuries, of effort. But I've used those tools. They don't leave cuts like laser lines. I've measured those seams. They don't align by accident. Something doesn't add up. Then there are the maps. Yes, maps. In Istanbul's Topkapi Palace lies the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513. It shows the coast of South America, parts of Africa, even the continent of Antarctica. Here's the twist. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820. And the coastline shown in the Piri Reis map? It's only visible beneath the ice. It matches modern seismic surveys of the subglacial shoreline. So again, we ask, who had this knowledge, and where did it go? Maybe it's not about aliens. Maybe it's not even about advanced technology in the modern sense. Maybe it's about forgotten knowledge, acoustic resonance, electromagnetic awareness, intimate understanding of geology, earth energy, and harmonics. What if they weren't less advanced, but just advanced in a way we don't understand anymore? In Egypt, there are hieroglyphs that depict strange devices. Spirals, rods, spheres, objects dismissed as symbolic, but eerily reminiscent of real devices. In the Baghdad Battery, archaeologists uncovered ceramic jars with copper cylinders and iron rods, possible primitive galvanic cells, from over 2,000 years ago. Why would ancient cultures need electricity? What were they trying to power? I once found myself in a chamber beneath Tiwanaku, Bolivia. The stone was warm to the touch, despite the cold air. My compass spun. The metal tools on my belt tingled. Locals whispered that the site still vibrated. I dismissed it, until I returned months later, with a geophysicist, and he confirmed it. Low-frequency resonance, like a power hum beneath the earth. There's more to these places than stone. There's memory, energy, intent. We live in a world of algorithms and satellites. But the ancients? They built for eternity. We've forgotten how. But maybe, they didn't build to impress gods. They built to communicate with them. And maybe, just maybe, they succeeded. Chapter V. Giants, Bones and the Missing Records. From the redacted archives of Dr. Jonathan Hale. If a discovery doesn't fit the story, it disappears. It began with a headline. Giant human skeleton found in Wisconsin mound. That was the New York Times. May 4, 1912. I was deep in graduate work when I stumbled across the clipping, yellowed, folded, buried in an old file drawer. According to the article, archaeologists with the Smithsonian Institution unearthed 18 skeletons, most over 7 feet tall, with elongated skulls and anatomical anomalies not found in modern humans. The skeletons were quickly removed, catalogued, and never seen again. At first, I thought it was an error. Or worse, a hoax. But then I found more. Dozens more. Black Small Square 1856. West Virginia. A grave uncovered. 10-foot skeleton. Buried with copper tools. Black Small Square 1871. Ohio. Bones of a gigantic man, found inside a burial mound with double rows of teeth. Black Small Square 1894. Indiana. 8 skeletons, all over 8 feet, with skulls so large they were nicknamed helmets. Each time, the pattern repeated. Discovery, public excitement, removal by official authorities, silence. So I called the Smithsonian. I submitted document requests, filed archive queries, reached out to retired curators, lab technicians, assistants. Each time, I was told the same thing. There's no record of that. It must have been misreported. We follow strict scientific procedures. And yet, the bones were real enough for newspapers, real enough for town photos, real enough for eyewitnesses, many of whom left behind journals, letters, sworn affidavits. So why did they vanish? I don't claim a cover-up. Not officially. But let me say this. In science, data that challenges the paradigm is rarely welcomed. It's filed away, lost, forgotten. Because if giants once walked the earth, then our timeline crumbles, our theories collapse, our uniqueness is threatened, and that, to some, is more dangerous than any myth. But the evidence lingers. At the Lovelock Cave in Nevada, bat guano miners in 1911 uncovered mummified remains of red-haired giant humans, many over 8 feet tall, with oversized skulls. The Paiute tribe has oral legends of a race of Sea-Taikaw, red-haired cannibal giants who once warred with their ancestors. They were eventually trapped in a cave and burned alive. The cave? Lovelock. Coincidence? Or continuity? The bones found there were real, photographed, catalogued, some even displayed in local museums. Until they, too, vanished. Today, all that remains are the shelves of bones labeled anomalous. With no further comment. I've seen them. I've touched one. Its femur was longer than my entire arm. And yet, there is no research paper, no analysis, no carbon dating. Why? Perhaps we've misunderstood the past entirely. Perhaps legends of giants, from David and Goliath, to the Nephilim in Genesis, to the Titans of Greece, are not myth, but memory. Maybe there really was a race of larger humans. Maybe they were a branch of hominid we didn't survive. Or maybe they survived us. I've asked myself, what if some truths were deliberately buried? Not by evil, but by fear. Fear of rewriting history. Fear of what it might mean. But I believe in evidence. In digging deeper. And sometimes, what you find in the dirt doesn't just challenge the timeline. It challenges the entire story. Soon sign next chapter. The War of the Gods. In the deserts of India, ancient texts describe a sky filled with fire. Cities turned to glass. Sounds like mythology, until we find radiation and vitrified stone. Chapter 7. The War of the Gods. From the unclassified notebook of Dr. Jonathan Hale, archaeologist. Myth begins where memory fades. But sometimes, myth remembers more than we do. In the ancient Sanskrit epic Mahabharata, there is a passage I'll never forget. A single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns. Rose with all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon. An iron thunderbolt. A gigantic messenger of death. For decades, scholars called it poetry, hyperbole, the language of metaphor. But what if it's not? What if it's eyewitness testimony? I traveled to India in 2007 to investigate this idea. Our destination was Mohenjo-Daro, one of the oldest cities on Earth. Nestled in the Indus Valley, it flourished around 2600 BCE, with plumbing, city planning, and evidence of astronomical alignment. But one thing stood out more than anything else. It was suddenly and violently abandoned. In the ruins, some skeletons were found lying in the streets, face down, hand in hand. No signs of trauma, no signs of disease, and, most bizarre of all, traces of radioactive ash in the surrounding region. Yes, radiation, the kind we associate not with ancient warfare, but with nuclear fallout. I spoke with Dr. Anil Kapadia, a geophysicist. He showed me vitrified layers in the soil, sand fused into glass. Not by time, not by lava, but by extreme, sudden, unnatural heat. And then he asked me a question I wasn't ready to answer. What if this isn't the first time we've reached the atomic age? I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling of a hotel room just miles from the ruins, wondering, could ancient civilizations have developed weapons like ours? Could they have destroyed themselves the same way we might someday do? The Mahabharata is not alone in its descriptions. Black small square in Mesopotamian texts. The gods of the sky use burning winds and weapons that blind like the sun. Black small square in the book of Genesis. Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed by fire, raining from the heavens, leaving behind salt and desolation. Black small square in Mesoamerican legend. Quetzalcoatl ends an age of man with fire falling from the sky. Reshaping the earth. Most call it myth. I no longer do, because these aren't isolated stories. They're patterns, and they always end the same way, with a world destroyed, and survivors forced to start again. There are more physical traces. At Harappa and Dholavira, certain structures show molecular alteration in their stone matrix, consistent with intense electromagnetic exposure. In parts of Scotland, fortresses are vitrified, stone walls melted together, not by fire, but by something far hotter. In Libya's Sahara, there lies the Libyan desert glass, a green, glassy substance stretching for miles, created, scientists agree, by heat hotter than any volcano. There is no crater, no explanation. So I ask you, if humanity has reached this level before, what happened? Did they annihilate each other? Did some survive, fleeing underground, across oceans, into myth? Were the gods we worship the survivors of a fallen age? Or the victors of its final war? I don't claim to know. But I have touched glass that shouldn't exist. I have walked through cities that ended too suddenly. I have stood in the shadows of stones that may have witnessed the first apocalypse. And I believe this: if we don't remember what they did, we're destined to repeat it. 7 million years of memory. Giants, gods, ghosts, and forgotten temples. So what does it all mean for us now? What if we're not the peak of history, but its repetition? Final chapter. What it all means. From the quiet reflections of Dr. Jonathan Hale, archaeologist. History is not a ladder. It's a circle, and sometimes that circle is a warning. I've spent most of my life brushing dust off broken bones. Some call that archaeology, but I call it listening. Listening to voices that no longer have mouths, to stories that no longer have books, to truths that no longer have a place in our textbooks. I've stood inside temples buried before farming existed. I've held skulls that didn't fit the species list. I've read scriptures that describe technologies too advanced for their time. And everywhere I go, there's the same echo. We were here before. We had greatness. And we lost it. Let me ask you something. Just once. Honestly, are we really the first? Are we truly the first ones to build cities? To raise towers? To split the atom? To speak to the stars? Because if we are, then why does the earth keep whispering otherwise? Why does every ancient site feel like a restart button? Why do so many myths end with fire? With flood? With a warning? And why does it all feel familiar? I used to think humanity was a straight line. From ape to man. From caves to spacecraft. But now, I see something different. I see waves. Civilizations rise. They reach a peak. Then they vanish. Sometimes it's nature. Sometimes it's war. Sometimes it's their own brilliance that destroys them. And the survivors, they remember. Faintly. They sing songs. Tell stories. Build new gods from the ruins of old ones. And then, the cycle begins again. So what does it all mean, for us? For you? For me? It means we're not just inheritors of stone and steel. We're inheritors of memory. And of warning. We stand at the edge of what could be another golden age. Or another fall. We have the tools. We have the knowledge. But do we have the wisdom? You see, this story I've told you, it's not about bones, or temples, or forgotten gods. It's about us. It's about remembering that history doesn't owe us a future. And that if we forget what came before, if we laugh at the myths, dismiss the stones, ignore the signs, then we are not advanced. We are amnesiacs in a burning library. But I believe in hope. Because we're still here, still listening, still learning. And that means we still have a choice. To rise higher, to live wiser, to build something not just bigger, but better. Something that remembers. So if this story moved you, if it made you feel wonder, unease, curiosity, then carry it forward. Tell someone. Ask questions. Dig deeper. Because buried beneath our cities, beneath our flags and our fears, lies something greater than mystery. It's a message. And it begins, always, with a whisper. We were here before. We can be here again.